Welcome back to Season 1 of Amidst the Ordinary. Today, we're going to dive into our sixth community principle, centering all around the idea of boundaries. Now, conversations around setting and maintaining healthy boundaries are rarely easy, but we hope this episode encourages you to have them. So let's dive in.
As you start sharing your lives with others, it's important to have self-awareness of how much you have to give and how much also time you need to recharge. And I remember one training that somebody talked about being wholly antisocial. There's just no way we can constantly be giving. And sometimes you just need to pull back, a big no, even if somebody's in need, just can't help you, not right now.
I always say to my kids, like with that at school, that when they're going, I said, you don't have to be everybody's best friends, but you do have to be kind to everybody. That's the reality. We're not going to all be best friends with everybody and have deep relationships, and that's okay.
We've heard it said that you can't pour from an empty cup. And while I believe this wholeheartedly, that doesn't make drawing boundaries easy. Knowing when to say no or step back and recharge is no easy task. I know for me, I often feel I'm letting someone down when I say no or I draw a line. Then the guilt creeps in, but as we will discuss in this episode, sometimes stepping back is the best way to step forward.
For Samuel and Sage, learning to set healthy boundaries in Guatemala took a lot of time and a lot of grace-filled conversations.
So Sage, she would sometimes feel very overwhelmed because she comes from a very different background, like a suburban area in the United States. Like, you barely know your neighbor, you have kind of your four walls and don't connect really or let people in your house, So in Germany, we grew up that way. The door was always open. Friends would come. I would go to friends, And so we had a little conflict there too, or a little bigger conflict sometimes. And so, Sage was pretty overwhelmed. Who could, we understand, like with 9 kids or 10 kids sometimes in the house, pretty overwhelming, pretty dirty. The house is pretty small, So, and then out of that went, I don't know, maybe for a year, half a year. And I just, we had a lot of fights about it, a lot of discussions, because I have such a hard time to say no when they look, when they look for attention, when they look for some fun and just need love, And I have such a hard time to say no. Even sometimes I'm really annoyed letting them in, but I just, it was really hard.
At one point, I had a panic attack. Like, just hearing the kids' voices outside of my door, I just began shaking and, like, shutting down. And so at that point, I got some help from a mentor, and I just decided I needed to relinquish control of how Samuel was wanting to be here. And I needed to just take care of myself. And so doing both those things, like relinquishing control and just taking care of me. So like sometimes I would, like one time I had to just get out of here when we had like 10 people staying in our very small house for a couple of days, for a few days. And I just went and stayed with an older couple for a couple of nights and just got away. And then I think through like me relinquishing control of Samuel and just trying to attend to what I felt like I needed from God in that time, it really allowed Samuel to, give me some more grace. And now I feel like I'm way more open and able to bring people in. And I'm like, when I got to the point where I just hated seeing kids at my door. I just hated it. And because of that process of, I think, both of us relinquishing control of each other and getting in tune with God, like taking care of us, it both allowed me to be more open and Samuel to maybe like draw some healthy boundaries.
Setting boundaries for yourself is hard, and as Sage and Samuel learned, setting boundaries alongside your partner has a whole new set of challenges.
Similarly for Karis and David, they found new challenges in setting boundaries as they learned how boundaries are understood in their new culture in the UAE.
The concept of boundaries is totally different in an Arab context. So where does that leave you? You know, you've come from Western context where we're all about date night on Tuesday, family day on, Saturday, Sunday is God's day, close the door after 7 o'clock. And I honestly, my honest opinion is I don't think you can live in an Arab community if you're going to be like that. So boundaries looks very, very different because for them, they are multi-generational with the grandma, with, all of the next generation, the children, and sometimes people go and get married, have their families, and they're still in the same house. So when you are part of a community like that, they did not understand the concept of these very strict, refined boundaries. I think boundaries look very, very different. And I think that's something that we struggle with a lot, trying to figure out that balance. Because when we first went to Oman, I was like, we were trying to fit so much in with our community that we just let every boundary fall down. And so that example I used, waking up my children, not having reasonable bedtimes, I was like, okay, none of the neighbors send their children to bed early. They're up till 11 or 12 o'clock. So do I do that too? I realized very quickly that my children were having meltdowns and weren't doing well at school. So my compromise was I communicated to my neighbors. I said, look, in the week, I'm going to kind of live a little bit more Australian. My children are going to go to bed at 8 or 9, and even that's late in a Western context. But on the weekends, we're going to be very local, very Arab. And so that was my little bit of compromise. I think we have become more Arab the longer we've been in the Middle East. And so we probably think sometimes that we're putting boundaries in place, but they're probably, in a Westerner's perspective, they'd probably come in and say, you guys have very few boundaries. You know what I mean? Because we do so much in community.
I think is one of our weaknesses, particularly as a family, and we haven't learned a good way to do this well. I think a little bit that's on Karis and I, as we constantly are very outgoing people. And so we find ourselves maybe burning the candle at both ends a little bit sometimes, or a lot of the time. However, we are intentional with our children. We see that as our first, if I may use the word ministry in this case, or our first obligation is to see our girls brought up in a Christian home, in a Christian environment. And holding to those values is very, very important. Our biggest boundary probably is that we still maintain a Sunday morning. Now, it used to be Friday, but Sunday morning, church is very, very important to us. We know that type of discipline is also good for my daughters to see. They get to join their community, have a Christian community in that, so they're with their Christian friends there. And then we have other times where we get together with others and pray, and that's very important. And we include our daughters in that, and other families that we pray with, their daughters will be praying with our daughters. And so there is this, that's kind of where we take the break.
I love the way David and Karis talk about boundaries. Not as something restrictive, but as something that really frees them up to live obedient, fully engaged lives. Themselves, their family, and their community has benefited from their healthy boundaries.
As everyone in this episode can attest to, setting boundaries is never easy, even the ones that seem like really small things. For Ali and Ewout, they had to learn that sometimes even what feels really generous in the moment may need a boundary down the road.
I'm thinking of that in the building where we moved in, where we had that neighborhood garden, we had a place for a cafe. We also had 2 rooms left. And we thought it would be really good if you could use those rooms for people in crisis situations. Because so
we even called it that. We called them like crisis rooms.
That's actually what we call them. Yeah, that was really
in Dutch. Works a little better, but
So again, really not thinking through what that would mean and what kind of people you would get. So if you create a crisis, I don't know, like daycare, or I don't know what it was. Like, I don't know what we were thinking. Then you of course also get that. So I remember, because those two rooms are right next to our apartment with just a really thin door in between. We had this girl that needed some space for 2 days, and we're like, yeah, this is our place. Why don't you come? I just completely underestimated what could happen. So I think it was like 10 in the evening that I heard really loud bangs, as if somebody was like knocking concrete, and it turned out it was this girl banging her head against the floor, and so I went in, like, is everything okay? And she was like, oh man, I'm aggressive, and she was a psychotic, I think, and she was saying like she was going to beat somebody up, and it was my children next door, my family. So I was like, wow, well, if you're going to beat somebody up, probably it's going to be me. But so in the end, I think we had to get this like 24/7 psychiatric daycare. They had to like put her down, like not like down, but like give her a sedator, a sedative, and that's where we were like, okay, this is not what we're about. So, and again, this is where you jump into something where you don't even know there's a need, where you go way faster than actually hearing from the people that you want to connect with what their needs are. So I think,
and then we changed the name of those rooms. We still had those rooms, and we just called them guest rooms. And then we still could invite people from the neighborhood that needed kind of a safe space.
I think there's a lot of fails where we've just haven't guarded our boundaries very well. If you want to do something for people where you sometimes just give too much, even as a group, you can get in that modus. So I think regular evaluation together, where we're at.
Looking into each other's lives as well, having open relationships where you can say, hey, looks like you're doing too much, or, you're not putting your boundaries in place.
Yeah.
Hearing that from someone that you love and trust can help.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's a cultural thing too, because we're very, so the Dutch culture is a much more private culture. So it's a real big stretch to open your house. Like, I know from friends in the Middle East, people are in their house the whole time. So that their context is different, that what they're used to is different. But yeah, it's just, I think we've all crossed our boundaries a number of times where you just actually you get fed up with it. So then so it hurts everybody then. Our house, our own little patch garden, just for our little family. So Ali and me and the boys, our 3 boys, bordered right at the community garden, and there was a small fence there. But as you share the community garden, people think like, oh, then we can probably also use your garden. So we had people knocking on our door. Can I go to the restroom in your house? Or can I have a glass of water? Those are all very small requests, which you actually the first time say yes to, because you're like, that's a small thing. But if that's right next to community garden and it keeps happening, it's crossing your boundaries the whole time. And you feel like there's never a moment for yourself.
So one time I had it, even like sometimes in the summer, when lots of families were there and stuff like that, I would have in an afternoon 5 people coming and asking, can I come in to use your bathroom? And one day I found just a woman in our house, in our bathroom, without even kind of asking to come in. She'd just come in, and I found her in the hallway, and she'd just come out of the bathroom. And I was like, okay, this was a step too far for me, because there is a public bathroom 2 minutes down the road that people could go to and use. And so then I realized I have to just say no to everybody, because I don't want to keep having to protect my boundaries the whole time. But that was really hard for me, because it felt like such a small thing. Of course, it's not a big deal if someone comes and uses your bathroom and you've got a kid that's desperate to go. But when it happens again and again and again and again, and it happens every day, then you start feeling that your own space isn't safe anymore.
And I think it's also creating expectation management with the people you connect with. If you don't guard your boundaries, they will cross it. You get cross with those people, and it's actually not on them. It's on yourself, because you haven't guarded your boundaries. So it's better just to be clear about it.
I cannot imagine walking into my home and an uninvited guest being inside. What started as an act of generosity for you guys quickly turned into something that was simply not sustainable. It is okay for you to make decisions that are best for you and your family.
Yeah, and on the other hand, sometimes what starts as a boundary for yourself actually ends up serving a need in someone else's life. This is what happened for Chris and Judy. So let's hear their story.
In this culture, men and women are very separated. So everything happens separately. And everything happens at night. So it's such a night culture. So Chris comes home from work, and then, 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, the men want to go out. And then the women want to go out as well, because that's their only time out. So for us, we tried doing that in the beginning, and we just ran flat. Like, that was so exhausting. Although we made good relationships, good friendships, but it was at the cost of our own sanity because we were so exhausted, especially Chris. And so what we've done is we've now just tried to schedule times differently. We don't go out in the week at night. We try to do that weekends. And we'll say to them, I can't hang out with the ladies on a Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. There's family time, So I've kind of put those boundaries down so they know, and it's good because they know that we family people, and they love that. So that was something that we got that going. And also we said to the friends that we met here, we said we actually love doing things together. So in our culture, we do things together as a couple. We go out together to the cinema. We go out together to the park with the kids. Chris loves playing with the boys in the park as well, not just me. So how about, and something we love doing is Friday night games night. We love that. And so when we opened that up to friends of ours, Arab friends of ours, the lady said to me, she said, Judy, oh my gosh, like my husband and I, we also love it, but we just don't have anyone else to do it with. We just don't have another couple who wants to do the same thing. So they've been married for 6-7 years. And this is what they've been craving to do. So now Friday nights, we get together with them. We at our place. They're from Morocco. And we just play games together as couples. We laugh. We share a meal together.
I bet Chris and Judy had no idea their boundaries would lead to even deeper, richer connections with those around them. For them, their boundaries gave them space to be more intentional during their time with their neighbors, as well as show their neighbors how highly they valued family. It is so clear that God was at work in their boundaries.
Let's talk with our panel about boundaries. That should be fun.
Well, this one was one I was most looking forward to.
Yeah, did it live up to it?
It did not disappoint.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah. I think conversations around boundaries are always, I don't know, I never really know what to expect going into it. I'm like, that is such a big topic, you know? And one thing I loved that... Maybe it was Judy.
No.
One thing that I hated...
No.
What do you mean?
I'm just setting a boundary here.
Oh. I was like, you want me to start on the negative? One thing that I really hated. I was so confused.
So, let's just get into the mood. Setting boundaries. Go ahead.
One thing that I really loved was how, I think it was Judy, articulated that like boundaries really bring freedom. Like they're not restrictive.
Ooh.
But really, like, I think it was her. She was able to better show up in her community because she had drawn boundaries for like, this is what I need. Or even when you think about it was her and Chris who like, they couldn't go out at night during the weeks because they were exhausted. And so when you set those boundaries, it's not like I don't want to connect with you, but rather I want to have more meaningful connections when I'm actually there. Kind of back to the presence piece we talked about earlier. Like I want to be fully present when I'm there and I need these boundaries in order to do that.
Oh, I love that.
That's worth a t-shirt.
Boundaries make freedom.
Yeah. You ever heard that phrase, discipline equals freedom? Really, it's boundaries equal freedom.
Yeah.
Those could be used interchangeably depending on how you...
True. Actually, yeah.
I think even going back to the the listening or curiosity episode, you need to build in margin so that you can have those conversations. And if you're just running around all the time, you're not going to have the capacity time-wise and emotionally, mentally to be intentional in the ways that you want to be.
Yeah, I know there was one comment, and I typed it down.
Very good.
She said, you don't have to be everyone's best friend. You just have to be kind.
Yep.
Honestly, because I know sometimes we could find I'll speak for myself. I could find myself striving for like, oh, I want to make sure that, but that's not really necessary. All I have to do is just be kind. If I've been kind to someone today, that's good enough. Yeah. Although I typically try to be kind to everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love it that we have an episode that's called Holy Antisocial, because we're talking about community, outward, sharing and be vulnerable, etc. But there's also a moment where it's like, no, now we need to think about ourselves.
Yeah.
And especially because some of the stories we're hearing is people going to another culture where boundaries are different, and you cannot make that complete shift. Because then you're not being real to yourself either. And I thought that Karis and David, the way they described, like, okay, at some point it was just too much. And so we had to get back to some of the things that are ours so that we could show up properly in the weekend, I think it was.
Yeah.
It made me also think of the one that you liked so much in the other episode on how community is dirty.
Yeah.
You will, if we open our doors or if we start entering doors that are open to us, we will connect with people that rub us the wrong way or are weird. Weird for us at least. Maybe they think we're weird too. You've always got people that are like some sort of emotional black hole. It doesn't matter how much attention you give them; it's never enough. So, some self-awareness and like, okay, that's all I can do for now.
Yeah. I really was entertained by your crisis room story. But realizing that if there's someone who really needs help, being kind and welcoming is actually not the kind thing to do, because that's not going to help them get any better. It's not giving them what they need. And so in that situation, the kindest thing to do is to get them the help that they need.
Yeah, and I think part of boundaries is kind of knowing your own limitations, like knowing what you're actually equipped to do. And so you guys recognize we're not professionals in the mental health space. We're not a 24-hour clinic who could properly care for you. We had really good intentions, but this isn't our space. So we need to kind of reevaluate how we use this. But knowing your own limitations.
It's almost prideful if you guys had kept the girl there, thinking that you could help her situation.
It would have been damaging, probably. For both sides.
For everybody. And so it's not even like I need to sacrifice. Like, yes, there is a level of sacrifice that we need to do for people, but I think having the discernment and having the mental clarity to be able to decide, okay, it's selfish of me to try to keep helping her. It's not going to help her. And so these are the next steps that we need to take.
How good are you guys in saying no to people?
I've gotten a lot better.
Same.
Yeah. So what did you learn in that? Like, why? There's a story there. I've got a lot better. There's a story there.
Well, no, because I realize that if I'm constantly trying to show up for every single person at every single moment, am I really ever going to be able to show up for myself? So in order for me to show up for myself, that's going to require me to say no or not right now to some other people. It's about also loving myself or loving yourself well as also.
Yeah. When I first got married, I was just involved in a lot of things, and my husband, we sat down and he was like, I feel like I'm not a priority, and I feel like other people and all these other things that you're signed up for are more important than our marriage. And so I really had to, and it took a few months. Every month I would kind of let go of one more thing. And it was hard because I found a lot of fulfillment and pride in all the things that I was doing. But I realized that that's not what I was being called to. And so our life looks a lot different now than when we first got married, but I feel so much better about how we're spending our time.
So you weren't so sure if wholly antisocial was even the right thing to say. So where are you at with that now?
I think it is the right thing to say. I think for me, I still struggle with saying no. Like I'm like, I can do that thing, so I should do that thing. And I want to be all things to all people. I want to fill the needs I see. I want to do everything that I can. I'm gonna show up. If I'm not busy, I'm gonna show up. And so I think for me, I don't know, this episode has just been permission, you know? It's been permission to be like, okay, 1, this is okay. 2, this is biblical.
Yeah.
And 3, I think comes back to like the freedom piece and the like showing up better when I'm there.
Yes.
Like doing all things. I'm not doing all things well. There's no way. Like something's gonna fall through the crack. And so being able to be more authentically and fully me in the spaces that I'm in.
Yeah. I think another thing in is what you were just saying is me. How do you say that? Being
all things to all people.
Yeah, all things to all people. Me being all things to all people is completely impossible.
Yeah.
Us being all things to all people is actually possible because then we do it together. We complement each other again, and that's again where we sometimes, especially in Western society, we've become so self-sustainable. We can take care of ourselves so well because we're often financially independent, you name it, but it's been taken away a lot of community in society because I can retreat. I can find out everything on this thing and pay for it, but we were never meant to do it. Me for all people, all things for all people. It's an us thing.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much lighter and more fun. So engaging community is already a community thing in itself. And it's really interesting to find people around you that like, hey, I'd love to engage more in community. Can we do that together? Because me is just me.
Yeah.
It's going to be exhausting otherwise.
Yeah, and I also think sometimes my failure to set boundaries steps on like other people's shape and their skill set, something that they could do so much better. Yeah. But I'm like,
With
I'm
joy.
not, but I'm like, I'm not asking you or setting the boundary that's saying like, I'm not going to do this thing.
Yeah. Ali mentioned it in one of the stories that we allowed within our community to challenge each other. We did it once a month. We just sat down like, okay, what's going really well? What can we do better? And so we, like Darren, you could have said to me like, hey, I just think you look really tired. Are you all right? Seriously, that we allowed each other to do that.
Yeah.
And when that becomes okay, because we set a specific time even for it, so you could maybe think it all month, but hey, let's just wait for the right moment. Like, and that was the time we gave each other permission to speak in each other's life, or saying like, hey, Paloma, I really noticed that you have shifted your priorities. Well done. And that really grew us to be more solid in how we showed up. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I feel like that's a good next step that kind of everybody can take, even if you're just doing it with yourself or with your people closest to you, like finding checkpoints where other people, because I'm like, if Paloma came up to me and she's like, hey, Alyssa, I really think like that you're like, you've kind of bitten off more than you can chew, like you seem tired or something, I would receive that. Kind of like you did when Chase said something to you. But sometimes you don't see that. And so it takes another person telling you. And I think that's a super good next step from this episode. It's just like, how can we implement that, you know?
And there's also, I remember that from as we engage more in the community, there's seasons. There, and to recognize the seasons where you might have energy to invest and the seasons where you just don't have that. And that's life, right? You need, so again, time comes in there. You need a little bit of time to listen also to yourself. What's going on in me? Like why am I restless? Why have I woken up 3 nights in a row at 3 a.m.? That's a little weird. Like what's going on here? Because there are always these indicators in our life that are telling us like, hey, yoo-hoo, getting close to the red line. And so listening again is a really important thing. Because if we don't do that, we also lose togetherness.
Yeah. Once again, all of the themes, they pile together.
I'm looking forward to next week's episode on grace in that. Because a lot of the things that pushes us is that we have a certain expectation of ourselves, and if we don't do that, guilt comes in, or we don't find ourselves good enough. And grace is the opposite of that. Hey, you're okay. You can just be. So, excited about that one.
Tune in next week.
Conversations around boundaries can often be difficult. We hope this conversation helped you discover the freedom boundaries can bring and give you some courage to have those hard conversations. We'll be continuing in this theme in our next episode, unpacking some of the rhythms that help us sustain ourselves and our boundaries. But at the end of the day, these episodes are just the beginning. Make sure to go deeper by signing up for our free 10-day devotional linked in the podcast notes or on our website, scatterglobal.com.
Music for this podcast was provided by Zach Winters from his new album, Shade of Indigo, which you can stream everywhere. You can find more about Zach and his music and poetry at zachwinters.com. This podcast was produced by Pete Hicks and the Mycelium Collective in partnership with Scatter Global. Concept and design by Peter Jan Rodenberg, Alyssa Valentine, Kristen Boyd, Ewout van Oosten, and Pete Hicks. And recording engineering help from Doug Domick.